Usually, a major indicator of a civil war happening in a country is if the amount of teenagers surpasses or outnumbers the amount of middle aged people in a society. So, if you have more 35 to 45-year-olds in a country as opposed to teenagers, then it's less likely to happen.
Do you think Gen Zers feel like the United States is close to a civil war? Because when you look at the rhetoric on the right,
Hmm.
so many people, and it's always these guys that are on Facebook that are like 67 years old, smoke 2 packs a day, and, couldn't run a half a mile to save their lives. They're always calling for the Civil War stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I don't see that on the left in my comment section because I have a mix of viewers, so much as I see it on the right. But, in your day-to-day life, do you feel like Gen Zers feel like, "Oh my god, we're gonna go to a civil war over this?"
Well, a civil war is kind of like an apocalypse in that it's a very appealing scenario because it's a reset. And a lot of people are very attracted to the idea of an apocalypse because they want a societal reset of some sort, or they want they want a situation where they don't have to be responsible. And apocalypses are attractive to people because they're like, well, I don't have to worry about cleaning my room because the apocalypse is going to happen. So civil wars are attractive to some people because there are people who have fantasies of being a hero or fighting wars because that's a relatively simple thing to understand. You have your side, there's that side, you must defeat that side. And wars are fairly simplistic things to understand, like, kill the enemy before they kill you. So I believe that there are people who are attracted to the idea of a civil war because they have some deep-seated insecurities, frustrations, emotions that they haven't fully processed. And it seems somewhat romantic to have a situation where you can fight for what you believe in, and also satisfying if you can, attack an enemy that is visibly in front of you and easily identifiable. Peace is more complicated. Peace discourse, disagreeing with people and coming to a consensus. You don't know who's on your side. You don't know who your enemies or your allies necessarily are. So that's a bit more draining on the brain. It's a bit more difficult to process and deal with. In the same vein that, sometimes it's easier to go through a breakup than to have a successful marriage because a breakup is easy. This person's hostile towards me and I can be hostile towards them. Whereas during a marriage, I'm sure you have a lot more experience with this than I do. I've never been married, but there are times where you wonder if you are making the right decision or not. And that's not easy to sort through. So I believe that it's a fantasy for some people to have a civil war. I believe that white supremacy is hoping for a civil war because there are a great deal of white supremacists who want to enact violence against minorities. They're just waiting for an excuse. Sometimes this can be during riots, sometimes this can be during natural disasters, sometimes this can be literally contrived out of thin air, like most race massacres that have happened in this country in St. Louis and Tulsa and Springfield. So I think it's mostly a fantasy. But what's also interesting is that usually a major indicator of a civil war happening in a country is if the amount of teenagers surpasses or outnumbers the amount of middle-aged people in a society. So if you have more 35 to 45-year-olds in a country as opposed to teenagers, then it's less likely to happen. As far as I know, it's very much not the case. I believe the United States is majority middle aged, and people are having fewer kids in general. And so, for that reason, I don't see a civil war happening. But I do see a potential for the United States to be broken up over time. I wouldn't be surprised. I am concerned very much by the president saying that they're going to withdraw federal funds for certain states that go against his agenda. That's how that starts, where these states start
Yep.
saying, well, we're not going to send you our tax dollars if you're going to withhold federal funding because you disagree with us. So that scares me a great deal because I don't want the union to fracture again. That would be very destructive towards the amount of goodwill that we've been gradually trying to rebuild over the past 150 years since the end of the Civil War. But the idea of another civil war happening in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't see it, in my opinion. I largely believe that it's just people who really want to live a life where they can do whatever they want without responsibility, including violence towards people that they have grievances against.
And the biggest thing that I always say to people is, when you're looking at a civil war scenario in the United States, how many people would volunteer to leave their cushy, air conditioned home and basically live out in, a hostile environment for months on end, which is what you would have to do
Yep.
with militias and then the military, and nobody really wants that. And I think one of the things that prevents it, if you look at the Arab Spring in countries like Egypt, Tunisia, etc., in Syria, I mean, those people had very hard lives and poverty was the vast majority of the population. And why didn't the Arab Spring happen in the Gulf states? Oh, because everybody's fat and happy in the Gulf states, right? They
Yeah,
all live
I
in big, nice houses with the air conditioning. They drive Mercedes Benz. Why would we do an Arab Spring here
no, I
when we
agree.
would
Yeah.
risk losing all this? Same
Yeah,
thing in the United States. I tell these people that want a civil war, they fantasize about it. First and foremost, uh, violence and confrontation, not even on a war scale, but just think about getting into a street fight.
mhm.
That is a very taxing thing to do. So if you've
Yep.
never been in violent confrontation, yes, Hollywood makes you think it's all great and good, but I guarantee you there's no responding in a real life deathly situation. This isn't
Yeah.
Call of Duty, okay?
Right.
Once you get shot, there that you don't inject yourself with some magic potion and you're just healed again. That's pretty much it. You're down for the count. Either you're severely injured, you're going to require surgery, which is probably not going to be available.
Mhm.
Look at the amount of amputations in the Civil War of the United States. It was in the millions, right? And so could you imagine living without your legs? Could you imagine living without your arms? Um, so usually it's these people that have never been in real violence. They haven't been in war. They haven't been in the military. Um, and the people that have been in the military that are calling for this, those were what we call the back enders. So they were the support staff. They weren't actually on the front line facing the Taliban. They weren't in the front line facing Iraqi insurgents getting fired upon. And so they're like, yeah, I was military. Okay, what was your MOS? What did you do in the
Mhm.
military? Oh, I was a
Yep.
cook.
Right. It's I
Okay.
mean, yeah,
So,
it's just
because
like
when
that
you
old
look at the special operations guys, they're like, no, we don't want a civil war. We
yeah, they
don't,
don't
because
say they
they've
don't
been
say
there.
anything. When gunfights actually happen, you have to know, am I being shot at? Where's this happening from? And all these things that are so uncertain, like, in real life, that most people have no idea about. So, like, I'm usually very clear on my TikTok if I get comments about it where I'm like, "I'm not gonna advocate for a revolution because I know myself, and I know that combat is not something that you want in general, but I also know the main reason why is because I know that if you have any type of armed conflict whatsoever, like, whatever is going on with, if you wanna call it Trumpism, if that would be the revolution. Well, the people who are gonna be targeted first are gonna be people with disabilities, people who might identify differently, members of the LGBTQ community, intellectuals, academics, and those are usually the first people to be targeted, either sequestered or executed or taken prisoner. And I have like I don't have the heart to do that. If there was absolutely no other means to protect people's lives, then it's mildly understandable. But most of the people advocating for revolution, civil war, that sort of thing, they really I don't think they really understand what they're asking for and what that would mean. And I think you're absolutely right. We live very comfortable lives with our very nice, very nice padded
Yeah.
chairs and AC and everything. And I think the majority of the US doesn't really want to give that up.